Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of the My Coach Ben podcast. Thank you very much for stopping by. It's greatly appreciated as always, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to the 2 new subscribers this week who have joined us. So welcome aboard, and I hope you enjoy the ride as we continue along the journey of career growth. If this content floats your boat, remember to like, subscribe, press the notification bell, tell your friends, fam, colleagues, etc. And we'll continue to develop this project together. What I would like to say actually is continue after the end of the video, because 1 or 2 people have said to me, well, if you don't tell anyone, no one knows it's there. So maybe do that at the end. Without further ado, let's get into it with the next letter. So in the last episode, of course, we looked at C, which was for clarity, and now we continue with the next letter, D. And despite some people guessing, as I've heard over the week, the letter D that we are going to focus on in this episode is going to be distinction. Distinction is something that's very important, and it's where you can kind of say it describes or it signifies that there's a unique selling point, let's say, or USP, if this is your kind of thing. So, as always, let's begin with a definition. And the Oxford English Dictionary describes distinction as excellence that sets someone or something apart from others. And then the example is a novelist of distinction. Distinction is an element of uniqueness. It's something that shows why you are something, as it says in the definition, is different, maybe better or worse even could be, than another product or thing or person of a similar ilk or in a similar position or something that does a similar job. And it does link back in some ways to the brand. We covered that for the letter B, and the brand essentially is something that sets you or a particular product apart from something else, and this is something that entails an element of trust, let's say, an element of belief, an element of familiarity, and distinction is something which is similar to that. So for example, in my workplace, I'm fortunate enough to work for a company that tries to instill a coaching mentality, let's say, or there's a lot of mentoring as well that goes on within the company. And in this way, we kind of harvest the skills that we inherently have as an organization or an entity. And I think this is something which you could call a distinction. There are other people I know who work for other companies in the industry, and they would say that this kind of approach or this culture distinguishes. So it's a distinction. It distinguishes the company from its peers. So we may not pay as much, let's be honest. But apart from that, there are other benefits which you can't really quantify in that sense. To use a technical word, you could say that it's an extrinsic value. It's something that you can't really put a finger on as such. You're able to quantify it, but it's not really, something that you can point to and say this is worth X. So distinction is something that carries a lot of extrinsic value. It's something that you can bring to the table to show why you or your product is particularly distinct from another. So that concludes the what. And then we come, of course, onto the how. So how, of course, does one develop distinction? How does one make sure that they are kind of set apart, or there is this excellence or uniqueness that sets them apart from the others? Well, the first thing I would recommend is to focus on your strengths. Now, having watched this recent series of podcasts or the old ones, you'll know that I'm somebody who says, well, focus on your strengths more than your weaknesses. Be aware of your weaknesses, but I wouldn't pay them too much attention. So therefore, as I often say, if you focus on your weaknesses at the expense of your strengths, then you become, mediocre, and this we don't want. So this is the first thing. Whatever strengths you have, whatever abilities you have, which can distinguish you from somebody else, whether it's going to be communication, whether it's a certain technical prowess, whether it's to do with using a particular kind of software or a particular kind of tool, or whether it's just your general knowledge about the industry that you're in. These are things which give you distinction, and these are things which you need to develop. And that leads me on to the next point, which I would say is that you have to continue to learn. And the more you learn, the more you can develop this excellence that will set you apart from others. And I don't mean in the sense of doing course or after course on LinkedIn Learning or something, although that is one way. But what you can do is also learn more about the job that you're doing, learn more about yourself as well. And once you gather this awareness, then it makes you a much more stronger and attractive proposition when it comes to growth in your particular field of work. So learning is a paramount. It's, as I say, it's something that you never stop doing in your workplace. And if you continue to do that, then of course the more, let's use an analogy, but the more you put in the bank. And the more you put in the bank, the more the account grows. Or if somebody wants to invest in that, or it will make the account stand out from the others, let's say, because the balance is that much healthier. Let's look at it that way. So this is one thing. And that leads us on to another final point I'd like to make as far as distinction. And that is to seek feedback from your peers. It's always important to listen to what people give you in terms of feedback or in terms of advice, and never be afraid to seek help. So by the feedback, there are many ways of doing that. In a lot of organisations these days, they have what's called this 360 feedback process, where you can select a number of your peers and then you can ask them to answer a few questions about you. This is a good way of finding out more about yourself, and where there are any weaknesses or drawbacks, let's say, that are highlighted, then you can pay particular attention to those, or where they inevitably will mention your strengths, then these are things that you can build on and you can develop and hone in order to improve your level of distinction against others in your particular field. And on a personal level for myself, how have I been able to, let's say, achieve a certain level of distinction, which is not to say that you're better than anyone else, but it's maybe something that sets me apart from others. And I guess those things would be a certain level of perception. As I said before, it's about having a mentality of continuing to learn. Also, I guess something which has set me apart from other people, and I've received quite often as feedback, is that I have an ability to convey maybe complex topics in a very simple way. And this is something which I'm actually quite pleased that someone's mentioned, and this is actually a very rare skill, which I think it is, because often in the workplace there are things which need to be communicated to people who actually or perhaps don't have the same level of insight into a certain topic, and then the question is, how can you break that down into a simple and understandable way, so that people can get from that what they need. And this is something which I think distinguishes me from a lot of my colleagues. So that's just an example of myself, and I excuse my squeaky table if you can hear that. So this is something which I think lends itself to a certain level of distinction, something that is akin to a brand, if you like. And to conclude, to summarise, distinction. So from the definition, we know that it's excellence that sets someone or something apart from their peers, and the example was a novelist of distinction. And you can also use that to say, I don't know, if you're an accountant, a lawyer, a trader, a builder, whatever you are, there is a certain level of distinction that one can achieve. And we, of course, know that it's similar to a brand, if you like. It's something that with a certain level of distinction, you can have a certain element of trust, or you can give a certain element of people a certain element of trust, as well as an amount of familiarity as well. So people know what they're going to get when there is a certain level of distinction. And when we talk about the how, it's important to focus on your strengths. Let's remember to look on the positive side of things, shall we? And not to develop or to look too much or focus too much on weaknesses, especially at the expense of your strengths. So that led us on to concluding that, of course, a learning attitude or a learning culture is the best way to make a distinction between yourself, because then one gains more insight, more knowledge, more experience in their particular field. And of course, we mentioned that a 360 feedback is one example of how one can go about getting feedback from their peers and friends alike, insofar as what can be improved or what you do well, in order that you can maybe focus on the strengths, and of course address some weaknesses which may be hindering your progress, in order to achieve the level of distinction that you would like. So on that note, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope that's been very useful to you. Of course, when it comes to distinction, there are many examples and many ways that you can achieve that, or that you can look at that. But I just hope this has given you a few morsels, a few bits of food for thought when thinking about the topic of distinction. As always, thank you very much for your time. It's been greatly appreciated. If you haven't yet, please do press the like button, subscribe, and spread the word. Leave a comment as well. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm always happy to hear. As I said before, wait until the very end of this. There is something that comes afterwards, and it will just give you an insight into what it takes to put something like this together. Let's put it that way. On that note, I will thank you again for your time, and look after yourselves and one another. And until the next time, guys, peace. Your Coach Ben. Distinction is essentially, in terms of your career, or in terms of your... So, stop saying so. God. Uniqueness, and it's similar to a topic that we mentioned,